All right, guys, so here's some advice that you're probably not going to like again. So this is my honest take on bootlegs and why I actually advise against them in 99% of cases to producers. So there are exceptions where it is good to do bootlegs. This is all my opinion, by the way. I'm aware that a lot of people are probably going to disagree with this, but I just still felt like I wanted to get my view on the matter of bootlegs out there. So the reason why, well, there's a number of reasons why I think it's largely a waste of time. But I do want to, yeah, make sure that I state as well that there are some excellent bootlegs out there, and some work really well and are really great. But basically, to 99% of producers, I would advise against doing it, especially if you're in the category of producer where you're starting to find your own sound, you're starting to get established, or you want to start getting established as a producer. So the reason that producers will often do bootlegs, and this is just like the honest truth, is from what I've seen, like through many years in the music industry, talking to people, connecting, networking, chatting with people in my Discord, like all kinds of reasons, people from different walks of life, right? But the main thread is always, if you do a bootleg, you'll get more exposure, okay? And so basically, you'll use a popular track or a more famous track, put your own spin on it, hopefully make it, not make it a good piece of music still, with the goal of then it reaching more people, getting more listeners, getting more exposure, because people are already aware of the original. So either they like the original or they like what you've done to it, but they sort of already have that attachment to the original, and so often this can actually get you more views and it can get you more exposure. But I would argue that that exposure is not worth the work of actually doing it, because for me, originality is like the most important thing that you can always be working on. And you can pretty much tell, like in the song, a lot of the times, again, this is not all the time, but like a lot of the time, you can tell when someone's done a bootleg, like through the music, that they've just done it for the exposure. Like it's not, you can't like hide that fact from anyone. It's very obvious. Like when again, this is like 99% of the time, but it's very obvious when you've done a bootleg that you've done it to get exposure. And you can like, that's how I always interpret it, pretty much. So there are times when bootlegs I would still recommend doing them, and there's kind of two phases in your career where that could be like applicable. And the one would be right at the beginning of your career, when or production journey, when you're just like toying around with ideas and starting out, and one would be like towards the end of, when you've reached the absolute pinnacle of the best. You've got your skills to the highest possible level that you can, and you think that you're now ready to take on a challenge of actually taking a popular song and remixing it, like officially, and then actually almost improving the original, like actually giving like not only doing justice to it, but actually pushing music in general in a new direction while doing the bootleg, while doing the remix. And this is like one example that I think back to of where this really worked well, was Urban Dawn with Come Together, the Beatles song. And when I first heard the first part of the song, I thought, oh no, you can't really have remixed a Beatles song in drum and bass. Like, no, that's not going to work. That is not going to happen. But the thing is, with Urban Dawn, when he remixed Come Together, the drop, because the bass design was so evolutionary at the time, it worked, because not only was he remixing a popular Beatles song, but at the same time, he actually pushed the sound of drum and bass forward with that song, because at that time it was a new level of sound design on bass. It was a new level, like in the melodic changes in the bass, the pitch changes, and the timbre and the clarity on the whole bass and mix down. It was like an evolutionary step in drum and bass, you know? So he wasn't just remixing and bootlegging a Beatles track to get popular. Like, yeah, sure, it was get popular at the same time, but the reason why it worked was because he was actually in that top 0.1% of producers who actually pushed the genre forward through everything else, through the production. So that's where it actually worked, you know? But 99% of the time in other bootlegs, that hasn't been achieved. Like, there's not been this like forward movement in the genre. And then it's just become like, okay, it's a cool take, like, but mainly it's kind of like the nostalgia and the exposure, but it's not like actually that original. It's just kind of like, you know, my my point here is that originality is the king, right? And if you're able to do a bootleg and inject such a level of originality that it takes you to a whole new world, then that is great, and you should do that. But I'm saying, I'm getting you to ask yourself, like, are you at that position in your career where you could actually take a popular song and put such a spin on it and push, almost like push music forward through this one idea? Or is it better to focus more on where you have an actual edge and you have control over being in the sense of actually being original? Because being original is the goal here that I'm trying to, you know, get producers to achieve. It's originality, you know. And so doing bootlegs, it limits you from being able to be original in a sense, you know, unless you're like onto some absolute winning formula with the particular bootleg, right? So 99% of the time I'd advise against it. And instead of doing that and chasing exposure, put the work into developing your own style and your own sound with your own like original tracks, even if they get less exposure. For me, it's much more valuable to have a song that is completely unique to me, that's original, that's my creation from start to finish, that has 2,000 views, versus a song that's a bootleg which got a lot of exposure that got 20,000 streams or views, you know? Like, I'd rather have that 2,000 one that was original. I think it's more powerful, because remember, a lot of those views that come over to the, you know, for the exposure of the bootleg are just for the bootleg. You know, they're just for that. They're not necessarily, it's not necessarily going to strengthen your identity as an original producer. It's a lot of the time people just like, they liked that original and then they like that remix, but it's not necessarily going to convert people over to be more like loyal to your sound, because you've come in from the goal of using a different sound to get exposure. You know, it's not been so much about your own original ideas that are getting you the actual bringing in the actual audience that you're after. Okay. But yeah, when you're just starting out and you just want to mess around and have fun, like, bootlegs are great. Like, don't get me wrong, like, still feel free to do that, especially when you're learning. Like, it can be cool. There's this thing also when you're starting out, when you like, you're really into the music, you hear a great track that you like and you want to remix it, and in reality, like, just because you like it, like, doesn't mean you should actually remix it, you know? But I've fallen into this when I've been starting out. Oh, I really like that. I want to remix that. It's going to sound great. And when you're producing it, it sounds great because you like the original, but you're not working on your originality when you're doing that, you know? So that's why I advise against doing it. Only in the beginning stages, if you want a bit of fun, then try something like a bootleg. And also what you can do is sometimes you can sort of start out with the bootleg, like kind of with the remix stems or the vocals or whatever, and then start producing, and then get to a point where you think, okay, let's actually scrap all of the original sound and like all the production I've done around it. Let's then build upon that and make something new with that. So that's what you could. That's the way you could also like start off with a bootleg, and then like scrap the actual bootleg stuff, and then just go roll with your idea, and then go in a different direction. That also can work sometimes. But yeah, that's just my opinion and my advice. So this applies literally to most producers. I would say, don't go for bootlegs, because like, we can tell that you're just doing it for exposure, and it's not actually giving us like a real It's not like giving you the extra gravitas for your own identity, you know, because your own original identity is what you need to be focusing on. That's the best thing that you can do, and it might not get you as much exposure in the short term, but it's gonna be more beneficial in the long term, 100%. All right, so that's my advice on avoiding bootlegs, until you're literally at that stage of production where you're so good that you could take something classic and like push the whole music industry forward through it. But unless you're at that point, I would say keep focusing on building your unique style and your original identity, and don't chase the streams. All right, so that's my advice. If you guys need any mentorship, resources are down below. Preset packs are available as well, and mastering services. And come along and join my Discord. We've got a great community there. It's a perfect environment to level up in 2026. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out. Much love.